Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and attending this introduction to tribal manufactured housing in Indian Country. We are excited that you've joined us and have taken some time out of your schedule to learn about tribal manufactured housing in Indian Country. This is the final webinar for HUD's Manufactured Homes webinar series. For more information or to view the previous webinars or materials, please see the HUD Exchange website. Before we get started, I've got some housekeeping to do. One, for today's webinar, you will be muted and your cameras will be turned off. There's a chat feature in the bottom right corner of your screen. Please use that feature to enable any chat with guests for technical assistance questions. Our host, Erica, will keep track of those questions and will assist you with any technical difficulties you may have. Also, there's another feature for our Q&A segment. If you click on the three dots in the very right-hand corner of your screen, it will pop up the Q&A, and you'll be able to post your question or write in your questions so our presenters can address those at the end of this presentation. Next, this webinar will be recorded and made available to you and the public via the HUD Exchange website. The video transcription plus the Q&A will also be available after the webinar. I would like to introduce myself to you. My name is Alicia Nevacoya. I am coming to you today from Tulsa, Oklahoma, on the Muskogee Creek Nation Reservation. I am a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma and Comanche by marriage. I am a tribal subject matter expert working with Capital Access to facilitate this webinar. Capital Access is one of HUD's technical assistance providers, and I'm again very excited to share with you this new opportunity for Indian Country that I believe will provide safe and secure housing for American Indian families and others who need it both on and off the reservation. Our other special presenters today are Jad Atala from the HUD Office of Native American Programs. Jad currently serves as Director of Performance and Planning and has some great news to share with us today about tribal manufactured homes in our communities. We also have Liz Boyd with the Red Cliff Chippewa Housing Commission and Patrick Goggles, the Executive Director of the Northern Arapaho Housing Development Services. So we'll briefly go over today's agenda. We'll discuss manufactured housing as an option for affordable housing on the reservation, funding sources that are available to tribal communities for manufactured housing. We will have a brief discussion about titling and financing considerations for manufactured housing on tribal lands. We'll hear directly from our panelists about how manufactured housing is working in their communities. And then finally, we'll hear it from you in our Q&A section. Please remember to drop any questions that you may have for Jad or our panelists into the chat box. And so with that, Halito from Oklahoma, Jad, welcome.
Hello, everybody. It's nice to be with you all today. Thank you, Alicia. My name is Jad Atala, as she said. I'm the Director of Performance and Planning in the Office of Native American Programs here at HUD. And we've been looking forward to this webinar for a while. Hopefully it's going to be very helpful. I really want to just start off by saying that, kind of laying the groundwork and letting you guys know why we're hosting this webinar. Seems like we have a nice mix of attendees. Some of you all are our typical tribal grantees who are familiar with our various tribal grant programs. So some of you may be coming from states, local governments, nonprofit world, CDFIs, and so forth. So we have a nice mix. But I just want to say, like, we have a new program, and it's the PRICE program. It's very exciting. We will be rolling the program out very soon. I'll speak in more detail about it in a second, but it's really a manufactured housing preservation program. And it's the first time the department is doing something like this. Congress provided appropriations in the 2023 appropriation for this program. And when we got funding for this program, not only did they provide a specific authority for us to provide funding to tribes, But it also got us thinking about manufactured housing and tribal communities. And so we wanted to put this webinar together preceding the release of the price program NOFO for a couple of reasons. Number one, we want to get the conversation going about manufactured housing and tribal communities. And we also want to promote this upcoming program. And for those of you who are tribal grantees or potential tribal applicants, I want you to start thinking about applying for this program when we release the NOFO. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So just a little bit of basic information about our program, our office, for those of you who may not be too familiar with ONAP, the Office of Native American Programs. We're kind of the HUD program, we're the HUD program office here that administers all of the tribal programs. We run a host of various programs from the Indian Housing Block Grant Program to the Indian CDBG program to the Section 184 program and various other programs targeting, housing, infrastructure, economic development, homelessness, home ownership, you name it. We work alongside our partners in the Office of Community Planning and Development, and that's part of this effort of administering this new program that we have coming up. It's going to be a partnership between the Office of Native American Programs and the Office of Community Planning and Development within HUD. Let's go to the next slide. So manufactured housing, I want to talk just briefly about it as an option and some important features, and then we'll talk a bit about the price program. So as you all probably know, there are many pros and cons to manufactured housing, but it's certainly one of the various options as housing practitioners that you all may have that's available to you. And there are some upsides. Obviously, probably the primary upside of a manufactured housing is the affordability. There's a lot of data out there that shows that manufactured housing is one way communities can try to address the affordability crisis. Manufactured homes, not always, but in some communities, in many communities, can be cheaper than site-built homes. Can be an advantage in that way and can certainly help address the affordability challenges. You can see on the slide up here the various reasons why manufactured housing is cheaper in many respects. But I think it's also important to remember that manufactured housing doesn't necessarily work for every single tribe and tribal community. We really want to push these resources out there and give you all an option if manufactured housing does work for your community, and give you all an option to apply for grant funding. But we do recognize it doesn't always work, particularly for certain tribal communities in certain climates where it may not be conducive for manufactured housing. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I was thinking about manufactured housing, and I was kind of looking around to find some interesting statistics to get a sense of the manufactured housing around the United States. And just a few statistics. There's 22% of households in tribal areas either have severely inadequate housing and are in overcrowded housing. And manufactured housing, as I said, is a possible solution to that. 22 million Americans currently live in manufactured housing, and something like 6 or 7% of the current housing stock in the United States is manufactured housing. So it's not an insignificant amount of the total housing that we have in the country. In rural areas, that number is about 15%. So about 15% of rural areas in the United States, that the housing stock in rural areas is manufactured housing. And you can see that in tribal areas, it's something like 17% of all households live in some kind of manufactured housing. At the same time, when you look at new loans that are being made, something like close to half of all of the loans made to American Indian, Alaska Native families in the United States are secured by manufactured homes. So a good chunk of the future, the new housing and the future housing that's being acquired and constructed right now is manufactured housing. There's probably a good chance that we'll see more and more manufactured housing making up a bigger and bigger portion of the housing stock in rural America and in tribal areas. So let's go to the next slide, please. So this is just a handy slide. These slides will be provided to you all. It just kind of breaks down different kinds of manufactured housing, modular housing, site-built housing, the differences and so forth. But I think the main thing is manufactured housing is housing that's constructed consistent with the HUD standards, the HUD code that HUD specifies, and it's housing that's usually placed on a permanent chassis. Modular homes are built to local codes, and all of these options are good options, but you just have to kind of assess the situation and see what works best for your community. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I want to talk, this is kind of the focus of my portion of the presentation, because I do want you all to very much focus on the tribal speakers that we have, and Alicia, who's going to talk about financing options, and our tribal speakers who are going to actually talk about real projects that they have carried out, manufactured housing projects that they've carried out in their communities. But I want to focus most of my time on the different funding sources that HUD and other agencies have to facilitate the construction and preservation of manufactured housing. So here is the message for this webinar that we want to get out there, and I want to make a point that we're going to do more webinars after the NOFO is published to give people additional information about this competition. So it's a new program. It's called the Preservation and Reinvestment Initiative for Community Enhancement, the PRICE program. It was enacted as part of the 2023 appropriation. It's about $225 million appropriated. David Price was the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, the Transportation and HUD Appropriations Committee. So this was a program named after him as he was retiring. And it very much is focused on preserving existing manufactured homes and manufactured home communities. So like I said, $225 million. There's a wide universe of potential eligible applicants under this program, under the appropriations language. So it's states, local governments, and Indian tribes, nonprofits, cooperatives, CDFIs, and other entities that HUD can specify. So just as a general matter, it isn't a ton of money, but it is $225 million. There is a broad universe of eligible applicants. So once we release the NOFO, you all will see who's eligible and how you apply. And something that's very important to mention is that the appropriation does authorize HUD to do a tribal set aside. So once the notice of funding opportunity is published, you all will see how much HUD is setting aside for tribal grants to ensure that tribes and tribal communities at least get some of this funding. Important to note the eligible activities. The eligible activities are, you see them up on the board. It's a lot of infrastructure planning, preservation, rehab, utilities, land acquisition, all focused on preserving and maintaining manufactured housing communities. So think of it as a very broad universe of not just applicants, but eligible activities, and all of it is designed to try to preserve for the long term the actual housing, and also the affordability and the stability of the housing for many of the residents who live in this housing, because many of them often experience a lot of housing instability. You'll see in a lot of manufactured communities, a lot of people don't actually own the manufactured homes. They don't own the land under which the manufactured home sits. So they'll pay lot rent and they'll own the manufactured home, but a lot of the challenges that people in manufactured housing communities face is housing instability because of that. This program is very much designed to sort of help stabilize that. We can go to the next slide. There's something very important here, which is that the law specifies that this funding is subject to Title I of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. Why is that relevant? That is relevant because it means that this funding is very much CDBG/ICDBG funding. So if you are a tribe, you need to think about your experience under ICDBG, and you need to think about this program from the ICDBG lens. Congress did give us waiver authority and alternative requirements authority, so we're going to be tweaking, we're going to be issuing waivers to tweak program requirements to make this program a little easier and more workable to address manufactured housing. But I think it would be a good idea for you all that are interested in applying to think about the tribal piece of this as ICDBG funding, ICDBG grants with certain tweaks geared towards carrying out manufactured housing projects. So if you think of that, I think that will help you kind of get a very good sense of what this funding is going to be like and what the requirements going to be like. We're going to make some tweaks to it, and that's all going to be specified in the NOFO. But just as a general matter, this is basically ICDBG money for manufactured housing. Another thing that's really important is we did some consultation on it. We put out a Dear Tribal Leader letter and asked people for some feedback on this program. We got a lot of tribal comments, and I want you all to know that we certainly took all those comments into consideration when we were developing the NOFO. So when you see the NOFO, just know that all of your comments that you submitted were considered, and we tried to incorporate as much as we could into the NOFO. One last thing to point out about this program, because this is ICDBG funding, the normal, the typical requirements in ICDBG when you're doing housing is that the funding has to benefit low and moderate income families. So just assume that that's going to be the case. ICDBG grants to Indian tribes and to Indian tribes that is geared towards manufactured housing for the benefit of low and moderate income Native American families. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So these are just some questions that you all should consider if you're thinking about doing manufactured housing and applying for a price grant once the NOFO is published. You need to think about the current inventory of manufactured housing that you have, how it's owned, the financing. We'll get to it. Alicia will touch on this later on. But certainly financing of manufactured housing is quirky. Some manufactured housing is titled as real property. Some of it is titled as chattel. Interest rates vary, risk vary, different local requirements apply. And so you have to think about all these things. And obviously when it comes to tribal lands, you also you have to think about the land and leasing the land and getting BIA approval in order to ensure that the homes can be sited on a particular piece of trust land. Let's go to the next slide, please. So that's price. I just want to briefly touch on the existing program separate from price. We do have existing HUD programs where we fund tribes via block grants, both the Indian Housing Block Grant Program and the Indian CDBG program. First one's a formula program where we provide annual block grants to all tribes. The second one is a competitive program where tribes apply and compete for funding annually. All of these programs currently can be used to preserve, construct, acquire, rehab, provide utilities, do site acquisition, all the kinds of typical things you will likely see under the PRICE program. Many of these activities can be done under our existing programs as well, the Indian Housing Block Grant and the Indian CDBG program. So as you're thinking about developing manufactured housing and preserving it in your communities, also look to the existing annual programs that are certainly a resource. Let's go to the next slide, please. And then for iCDBG, an interesting kind of twist, and this is certainly the case for the broader CDBG program. Not only can the funds be used for housing rehabilitation, housing acquisition of the homes in some situations, but it also can be used as an economic development activity where you can use your iCDBG funds to provide funding for businesses that will actually manufacture manufactured homes, create low, moderate income jobs, and that kind of thing. So I very much encourage you all to think about these resources. Certainly start thinking about price. When the NOFO comes out, ONAP will do and CPD will do a big push to try to get the word out. We'll encourage tribes to apply, and we will also do some additional training. And at that time, we will have a bit more freedom to talk about the contents of the NOFO, since the NOFO will be out. Right now, I'm a little limited in how much I can talk about what's in the NOFO, since it's still under development. But I thank you all. I'm going to turn it over to Alicia. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end. Oh, maybe I missed my last slide. Those are some additional resources. They're important resources for funding manufactured housing in tribal communities. I'm happy to answer questions at the end. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Alicia. Thank you so much.
Jad, that is wonderful news. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and with our community today. I know there will be extra questions for you at the end, so we look forward to hearing more from you. So as we move into some of the title and financing considerations for manufactured housing, there are some considerations for tribes to be concerned with, or, concerned within the tribal model, that is. There's a lot of work to be done, a lot of infrastructure work to be done. But stable housing is essential for improving and strengthening families and tribes, as well as cultivating asset building, including building pecuniary wealth on the reservation. Yet, for too many households, securing an affordable rental home or purchasing homes is just an unmet goal. But due to their lower building costs, year-round construction, and relatively low price points, manufactured housing is a good strategy for growing the number of affordable rental properties and increasing home ownership among low and moderate income tribal households. So tribes that are seeking to expand the use of manufacturing housing for renters, potential home buyers, and others will need to address many planning issues on the reservation first to effectuate a smooth transition into manufactured home communities. Pre-planning ventures, including putting together a stakeholder team, may include, which is going to be important, and it's going to include people from your housing department, TRO, and procurement agencies, interested community members, financing companies from federal and private sources, leasing and realty departments, your tax commission, and even your chairperson, housing director, and lawyers who are authorized to make decisions for the manufactured development on the reservation. So while manufactured housing shares some common themes with regular construction site-built housing on the reservation, there are some differences too. But in general, the common questions that your stakeholder team will want to answer before you plan any type of property development might be: where will new homes be built? Where do families want to live? What is the status of the land? Will families need to obtain leases? And what steps are we going to have to take internally for tribal members to obtain leases? A new issue in manufactured housing in Indian country is the way manufactured housing houses are financed and titled on the reservation. As those of us who work in Indian country know, much of the tribal land in the United States cannot be repossessed, and therefore that prevents lenders from adequately securing mortgage loans with a lien on the reservation. But manufactured housing offers an entirely private, free market alternative that allows consumers living on tribal land to obtain rapid access to inexpensive and safe housing. Manufactured housing does not require a mortgage to be secured by land and is therefore more accessible to consumers living on tribal lands held in trust. Titling issues often arise because manufactured housing is generally considered personal property, or also known as chattel property, and not real estate. And here the term chattel property refers to movable personal property. So why does this matter? It matters for a couple of different reasons, primarily related to finance. In general, there are two options for financing manufactured housing on the reservation, and that includes chattel finance and then conventional mortgage lending. Chattel finance of manufactured homes is an option, but it sometimes can be more expensive to homeowners. Chattel financing refers to the private industry and markets that finance manufactured homes. So, for example, if you go to your local manufactured home dealer near the reservation, they'll have their own private internal system of finance. It's sort of like buying a car. When you go to the car company, they'll have their own internal finance factors for you to engage in. And sometimes this chattel property financing will be higher depending on many factors, including your credit worthiness and, and other things like siting on the reservation. But despite the higher cost of chattel financing, most loans for the purchase of new manufactured homes are secured only by the structure itself. So only by the structure itself and not by the land the home will be sited on. Our other finance option is conventional mortgage lending. If a manufactured home on the reservation is titled as real estate and not chattel property, your finance options then open up and get larger and can include conventional sources of mortgage lending like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, HUD 184, VA, FHA, and others. But the tribes must prepare for this type of finance on the reservation. And to prepare the community for this type of financing, tribes should enter into or must enter into a memorandum of understanding with federal agencies to make competitively priced mortgage financing equally available for manufactured homes owned or leased on allotted lands. Next slide, please. A number of mortgage products are designed for rural and native home buyers, including Rural Development 502 loan, the HUD 184 loan, the VA Native American Direct loan, and other products like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA, Title I and Title II. For tribal members to access some of these programs, the tribal government again may need to enter into specific agreements with the relevant federal agencies. And I wanted to share some statistics with you about conventional loan products that I have found for loans on the reservation. Between 1995 and 2015, Fannie Mae, through the Native American Conventional Lending Initiative, purchased loans covering 11,804 single-family homes on tribal lands, including properties on trust, allotted land, and fee simple lands. This totaled nearly $1.1 billion. And those totals included HUD 184, FHA 248, USDA 502, and other conventional loans. So the good news is that mortgage financing on the reservation is available and is being widely used throughout Indian country. And so those are some viable and good options for tribes as we move into manufactured housing opportunities in Indian country. And so with that, I just want to thank you for listening to my comments. Now we'll move on to the section where we will hear directly from our tribal grantees who have been living with, managing, and regulating manufactured housing on their own reservations. Today, we are pleased to have with us Patrick Goggles and Liz Boyd, but first we'll hear from Patrick. Patrick, are you there?
I am here. This is Patrick Goggles speaking.
Welcome. Please tell our listeners a little bit about your experience with manufactured housing on the reservation.
Can you all see me? Okay, we still
No.
haven't resolved that issue, okay? Let me begin by introducing myself. My name is Patrick Goggles. I'm the Executive Director of Northern Arapaho Tribal Housing, located on the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming. And we live in west central Wyoming, near the foot of the Wind River Range on the west, and on the north, the Elk Creek Range. So we live in a basin area, a valley area. We receive a lot of snow, I would say. Last year was particularly brutal. But in terms of manufactured housing, I have a project and have completed a project called the Chief Black Hole Project. We named the project after one of the original band chiefs that brought his band to the Wood River Indian Reservation in 1887. And his vision was to find a home for his band of Arapaho. And he was successful in doing that, in locating them on the Wood River Indian Reservation, at the time known as the Shoshone Indian Reservation. So they were placed on this reservation with the Eastern Shoshone tribe. Getting back to the project, that we endeavored to build, to construct, is an affordable housing rental, single-family project. And we have 20 units, 10 three-bedroom units, and 10 four-bedroom units. And we designed our own plan in terms of and putting together a floor plan for these units. And the manufacturers, architects took our plans, made some modifications, and used our floor plan to build the three bedrooms and the 10 three bedrooms and the 4 10 bedrooms. And our four bedroom units are 1,400 square feet. We found that the 1,200 square foot unit just wasn't working for our families because of overcrowding, acute overcrowding conditions. So our work during the pandemic was that one bathroom wasn't working for our families, because one bathroom led to exposure of COVID to the rest of the family, and that just led to more COVID cases on our reservation. So when we planned this, we planned 2 bathrooms, one on each side of the building for the 3 and 4 bedrooms. The 4 bedrooms, like I say, are 1,400 square feet, and the 3 bedrooms are 1,380 square feet, and both have 2 bathrooms. So using that plan, we also developed roof 312 slopes on our roofs to handle the snow loads in our areas, but to make it a vaulted roof inside of the units to give it a roomy feeling. And we basically undertook this project because of necessity. We were one of the original applicants for the competitive IHBG. We were one of the first tribes to be awarded. And then the pandemic came along, and we spent 2 years basically in limbo. HUD, Northern Plains office was closed for approximately 2 years. All of the parts of the COVID affected us: labor shortage, the supply interruption, inflation, the increase of cost of materials. We had originally planned to build this project, stick build it, but because of the COVID, we had to expedite our plans, and so we went to the concept of manufactured housing, and they're really basically 2 areas. One is the manufactured unit with a steel undercarriage, and then you have your modular units that generally sit on a foundation. So our units sit on a road-based path that has been compacted according to engineering specifications, and we did a procurement and secured the contractor, a local contractor here in Wyoming, who bought the units from a manufacturing company in Weiser, Idaho. So our units were constructed in Weiser, Idaho, and the construction of one unit took them about 45 days. Whereas a stick-built unit with our capacity took us about 150 days to build a house. So you can see 45 days versus 150 days, and the timeline in our estimation was a lot shorter. It would have taken us 3 years to stick build those 20 units. And just so you can get an idea, the first planning, things that we did was land. Because we had to deal with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and leasing and putting together a subdivision lease. Not single lots, but a subdivision lease, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs had very little experience in dealing with subdivision leasing. They only had experience with individual home site projects of 2.5 acres. So the subdivision plat included all of the utilities. And I hate to disagree with HUD, but when you're doing infrastructure, you have subcontractors. You have a utility subcontractor for natural gas, which we used, electrical subcontractor, which we used, the local cooperative here in Wyoming. And then we also use the tribal internet service as a subcontractor. And we had a infrastructure contractor that hired subcontractors for the electrical service and the curb gutter and asphalting. So the subcontracting area, yeah, you really don't get away from it unless you're specifically construction ready. And then you can depend on, or you can sign a contract with the ours was called Factory Outlets. We signed a contract with them for the delivery of those 20 units. And that begs the question about warranty. So the original company that we signed off only guaranteed the unit delivery and any damages, but the actual warranty of the unit was by the company in Idaho, the manufacturer. So there was a manufacturer warranty that's still in place. So you have to be cognizant of that part of it. We utilized the Indian Community Development Block Grant for $800,000 for the infrastructure. The USDA Rural Development Facilities Program for $885,000 for the water and basically the water and wastewater and the drainage water. And we also had an additional $629,000 for lift station for the sewer water. And then we also had the competitive Indian housing block grant for about $4.4975. And we ourselves, because of cost overruns, unanticipated costs, took out a loan from our local banking institution for 1.2 million. We did not use any loan guarantees on this project. Our own credit worthiness gave us a lower interest rate than having a loan guarantee. So it took us about 3 years to complete this project from beginning to end. My biggest challenge was capacity, ensuring that I had the local capacity in my crews to build the pads that the houses were going to set on, make sure that the infrastructure was taken care of according to specifications. So I leaned a lot on the engineering company that I hired for them to ensure that specifications met HUD regulations. And your units also have to meet the HUD regulation or a code regulation. So you hire an inspector to ensure that these houses have met that code regulation. You may have tribal regulations that are in your tribal law and order code, and that needs to be complied with as well. I want to say that the decision to go the manufactured was a financial decision, our capacity, our time schedule, and spending matter, federal dollars, because there's a 5-year limit on our pipeline life. And the COVID pandemic has cost us 2 years in which to complete the construction. And in terms of what we were talking about, the 20 units, we had several years ago, I determined that we needed 500 units to meet our needs on this reservation on the Northern Arapaho people. 20 houses is a drop in the bucket. We're looking forward to doing more. projects using tribal land rather than using any allotted land or using any fee simple land. Specifically using tribal land, there are no associated fees for county governments or state governments, so there are very little tax burden. The only tax burden that you may find would be the terror ordinance that general contractors are required to pay to the tribes here under the terror ordinance. That's 2% of total cost of the project. I would say tribes and or TDAs that are considering manufactured housing should engage in a planning and pre-development phase to financially estimate the total cost of the project and to map out the estimated project timeline. Very important. And you also need to evaluate your organization's capacity and to determine the financial and contractual management experts. You're basically managing contracts. So that the HUD structure is you have a finance officer, generally the person in charge of your finance officer, a contracting officer, generally like a person like myself, like the executive director, and you have a project manager, a person that's working as your boots in the field, can act as your owner rep as well. And you also should rely on your architects, if you have one employed, especially the engineers, to ensure specifications are followed. And you need an owner's rep that can address the individual areas of electrical, like gas installation, natural gas installation, the unit itself, the asphalt itself, all those areas you'll need that capacity to ensure that specifications and codes are complied with. And you need to understand the federal regulatory requirements placed upon you by utilizing federal funds that are coming through HUD or USDA. And I would express to you that the two are not the same. HUD, I find an ONAP very reasonable to work with. I find USDA to be very onerous in their regulatory requirements and their oversight. This type of construction, with manufacturing requires you as the owner to be on site daily. You need to be there daily to ensure the product that you're buying, the services that you're acquiring are done correctly.
Thank you.
I'm about there, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Patrick, that is great advice, and it's so valuable to have firsthand knowledge of these manufactured home communities from people in the field who are doing this work every day. So we appreciate your time and your comments on this. There'll be a Q&A section at the end, and I'm sure you'll have questions. So please hold the line. Liz, we would be happy to hear from you. Liz Boyd.
Hi, my name is, yep, I'm here. I'm the homeowner homebuyer program manager for the Red Cliff Housing Authority in Bayfield, Wisconsin, right at the tip of Wisconsin by Lake Superior. What was the first question? Sorry.
Just tell us a little bit about your manufacturing housing projects, the type of project, how many units you have, what funding sources, and anything else that you think might be helpful for people to know.
In 2018, we did the first ever tribal census for us. And the #1 priority from our community members was to see more housing developments. Based on the results of our survey, 27.3% of our homes are currently overcrowded. In fiscal year 2019, Red Cliff received $4.8 million in IHBG fund or grant. So we were able to start a manufactured housing project. We were able to get 10 home ownership homes, and the sizes range. There's 1 5-bedroom, 1 4-bedroom, 3 3-bedrooms and 5 2-bedroom homes. We are also able to get 12 rental homes in, and 6 of those were 2 bedrooms and 6 of them were 3 bedrooms. We decided to go with manufactured homes for the timeline. It was a lot faster than being able to get stick built in. With the grant funding we received, we also did all of the site prep, land clearing, water and sewer hookups. And for the homeowner units, they did not have to recoup that cost. So when we got the homes in, we sold them at cost. Some of the challenges were not a lot of manufactured dealerships deliver to our area. We sent out multiple RFPs. I think there was like 20 that got sent out to different manufactured dealerships, and only 3 responded that they would be able to deliver to our area. The first part of the project, or all of the rental homes and 3 of the home ownership homes, came from one manufactured dealership. And the other 7 homeowner homes, we had to go with a different dealership. They had better pricing and a shorter completion time. When you are getting ready to set up a program for manufactured housings on your reservation, things you need to consider are they going on lease sites? Is it going in an area that's already been cleared? What the construction timeline is like, if you're gonna need a general contractor. When it comes to leases, how long it's gonna take the BIA to be able to approve a lease. And all of our home ownership, we don't have any funding to do private loans through our housing authority. So the homeowner units had to be secured with a mortgage from a financial lender. And we only have 3 lenders that are willing to work on reservation because of the land not being able to be used as collateral.
That's really interesting. So your options are sort of limited then?
Yeah, we are there. A section 184 will work on the reservation. The USDA 502 loan will work, and the Wisconsin Native Loan Fund works with us on reservation.
I saw that. That's a really interesting program. So, Liz, do you have any final comments?
I don't think so. I know we're running a little short on time, so I will stop. That way people who have questions have a chance to ask.
And I think there will be some questions for you. Thank you so much for sharing your experience in the manufactured housing community with us on the reservation. We really appreciate your viewpoints and your opinion.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So I think we're going to go ahead and move into Q&A now. So as a reminder, if everyone, if you have questions and you can drop them in the Q&A and address them to all panelists, that would be great. So I'll go ahead and start off with some of the questions. Looks like we've gotten some very good questions. So let's see. Give me 1 second. So we did have a request to summarize the ICDBG program requirements. And just to call out to everyone, there is a link in the chat to the HUD website's program page that gives some information about basic ICDBG program requirements. So just wanted to call that out to everyone. So let's move on to our next question. So we have a couple of questions about price, and before I go into those, I just wanted to check with Jad and the HUD folks as far as just are you able to speak on any additional details, or do we just need to wait with bated breath?
I think it's going to depend on the question. So why don't you tell me the question,
Okay.
the specific question? I'll let you know if something we can answer.
No problem. So the first question is, Can you build new manufactured homes with the price funding?
Okay. Yeah, that's falls in the bucket of you will find out soon when the NOFO comes out. That's certainly a question we have considered as we were developing the NOFO, and that was part of the tribal comments that we got when we did tribal consultation on it. Many tribes recommended that the funding not only be available for housing preservation, but for like acquisition of new manufactured housing. So we certainly consider that feedback, and it will be specified in the upcoming NOFO. Sorry, I can't answer that directly just yet.
Thank you. So the next question is, how are these loans insured? So in other words, loans on tribal lands, are they insured with HUD or FHA Title I insurance? Do we have any information we can provide on that?
Yeah, I think that all of those are options. 184 does insure manufactured housing. We do provide loan guarantees for loans for manufactured housing, but one of the conditions of our program is it does have to be titled as real property. So I can speak to 184, and I can tell you we do guarantee loans for manufactured homes, but we do require that they not be chattel loans. Title I is an option in some situations. And certainly if there are other conventional products, for sure. Alicia, is there anything you want to add there? This is maybe a question for you.
No, I think that hits the nail on the head, but it's really going to depend on the loan product and your specific situation as to whether or not, mortgage insurance will be handled, or how mortgage insurance will be handled.
Yeah, just as a general matter, everything I've read says the interest rates for chattel loans can be significantly higher than loans for real property. So just something to consider. There's certainly upsides to the manufactured home being considered real property, but there are downsides, and certainly interest rates being much higher is a factor.
Thank you. So the next question is a price question. It is, will the manufactured home activities under the price program have the 20-year affordability requirement with them?
Another one that will be addressed in the NOFO. So I can't speak in terms of specifics. We are certainly considering some kind of affordability requirements. Because again, the point of this program is to preserve manufactured housing and to preserve its affordability and to provide assistance to low and moderate income families. And with respect to the tribal grants, low and moderate income Native American families, tribal members. So you will see soon, but it's certainly something we have considered, affordability. There's no clear across the board rule right now that says 20 years. Sometimes we've used that. Some tribes will set that as a useful life period for their HBG formula program, and some tribes, when they apply for the Indian Housing Block Grant Competitive Program, will score higher points when they propose, 20-year affordability periods. But that's not a bright line rule. That's just a metric we've used. So in ICDBG, you just kind of have to wait and see what's in the NOFO, but it is a metric we've used. It's not a rule that is set in stone.
Thank you. So the next question is, what happens if tribal members default on a home that's funded with a chattel loan? And again, I'm not sure if we have insight on that, or we could get back to, we could follow up later.
Alicia, do you want to tackle that? Okay.
I will, just say that, the tribe has to be prepared with legal and legislative infrastructure to be able to handle defaults through tribal courts and, unfortunately, eviction procedures and repossession on the reservation. So there's a lot of things to consider there, but generally you're going to defer to your tribe about how they're going to handle many of those issues.
Thank you. So the next question, I believe, might be directed to Patrick. I saw it come through while Patrick was speaking. So Patrick, I think it's for you. And the question is, what are your average rents per month per unit, if you have that information handy?
Okay, there I am. Currently, the rental maximum and minimums through our tribal housing policy, $100 a month on current inventory. The maximum is $475, depending on their income, using area median income that HUD issues. So seating, I mean, the minimum is $100 and maximum is $475. If we're having over income participant, then we use market rate. In this area of Fremont County, Wyoming, the market rate for a 3-bedroom is $1,200. So a very stark difference.
Thank you. So I'm just scanning through. So another question about price. Can price be used for Hawaiian homelands manufactured housing assistance in all areas that the funding can be used for? Do we have an answer to that yet?
So potentially, I think that the Department of Hawaiian Homelands was not expressly listed as a grantee in the legislation, but states are eligible, local governments are eligible, and the Department of Hawaiian Homelands is a state entity. So we'll look into that and confirm, but they wouldn't come in as a tribe. They could potentially come in as a state entity or a local government. Like I said, the universe of eligible applicants in the legislation is pretty broad.
Thank you. So the next question we have is, what requirements or licenses are the contractors required to have in order to be able to set the manufactured homes on tribal land versus off tribal land? Are there any general guidelines for what kinds of licenses, certifications, qualifications that a contractor should have? I would guess that
Would you like me to answer that question?
Absolutely.
On the Wind River Indian Reservation, there are 2 tribes, the Eastern Shoshone, Northern Arapaho, and they have a joint ordinance, Tribal Employment Rights Office ordinance. All contractors are required to register with the Taro office, provide them with a plan which they intend to hire tribal members, and also pay their Taro fee, which is 2% of the total cost of the project. So my project for example, the Cheap Black Hole project, we had a $4 million or a $5 million contract for the units. So the company that got the bid had to register with Taro and pay 2% of the total cost of the project. Tribes do require licensing in this reservation. Whether it's I'm not sure they require, well, they don't require a licensing for electrical and plumbing or building permits. That's all handled through my office, and I ensure that they have the proper qualifications. That would be my answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just add that if we're talking about off tribal lands, then it might depend on the state or county requirements. So it might vary by state or county. Some states have no requirements at all for a contractor license, and others require contractors to be certified. So that could also vary depending on where the units are located.
Can I say something quick?
Of course.
For our project, with the manufactured housing, our contractor had to have design builders insurance and bonds along with owner insurance for the company.
Thank you. Yeah, so that could be a good guideline as to the kinds of things you might, the kinds of things you might want to be looking for. So our next question, oh, looks like we're just actually at time. I don't know where that last few minutes slipped away. So I think we are going to have to go ahead and wrap up for now. But thank you all so much for attending. And I did want to just call out your attention to this link that is on this last slide here. It is a link to the entire series of manufactured housing. So there are some additional webinars with really good general information about manufactured housing, some ownership and governance and financing questions. So we encourage you to check that out as well. So Alicia and Jad, I'll turn it over to you to go ahead and wrap us up.
Well, I just want to say thank you. We really appreciate it. And thank you to Capital Access and all the other speakers. And we look forward to putting out more information in the near future about the price program. And it's just very invaluable to hear from people like Patrick and Liz, who have, real project experience, and an expert like Alicia who understands kind of the legal framework here. So thank you all. Really appreciate everyone's participation.
Yeah, I just want to echo Jad's sentiments and thank everyone for joining us today. This was very informative.
Thank you.